Welcome to episode 29 of the Mental Dietitian Podcast. I'm your host, Ahren Lynch-potter, and today's episode is going to be a short one, I think, because I'm going to extrapolate a thought on the fly while I'm talking to you guys, which is what I usually do. I do not have a script. I do not really have a plan sometimes. What I do have is I have a thought that I want to extrapolate and I want to explore live on this podcast, and that's what I do. I don't have notes. I don't have shit. So, expectation versus reality. One of my favorite quotes that I've ever heard, it was by John Maxwell, amazing leadership author. Read his books. They'll change your life. He's a Christian guy, but even if you're not Christian, his books will still change your life. But the reason I say that is he references God a lot, so you could just replace it with the universe or whatever the hell you want to replace it with. Anyway, he has this saying that is the gap between expectation and reality is called disappointment. Disappointment is the gap between expectation and reality. So how do you remove disappointment from your life? Gary Vee talks about this a lot. He says he doesn't expect anything. Therefore, you can never really have disappointment. You can never have suffering. And this is the thought that I was thinking about that I wanted to extrapolate. I want to explore that's amazing to have no expectations of anything at any time. In theory, you would never be disappointed because then the gap between the expectation and reality, there is no gap. It doesn't exist because you never had an expectation in the first place. But is it safe to expect nothing? What I mean by safe is if you have a massive goal in your life and you're working really hard towards it, and you just say, well, I don't expect anything from this. And is that doing yourself a disservice? Is that almost potentially preventing the goal or the thing you are striving towards? Now, I thought about this thought and I was like, well, if you really were focusing on the process of something, falling in love with the process versus the expectation of a goal or an outcome, and you more were focusing on the process, you're almost guaranteed whatever that thing is. For example, let's talk jujitsu. If you go to jujitsu 3 to 5 times a week for 10 to 12 years, consistently, never take any time off, you'll be a black belt. It's just a reality. But if you expect to train 5 to 7 days a week, and in 5 years, you'll be a black belt, that may not happen because there's many different factors. So the difference between the expectation and the reality is you might expect to be a black belt in 5 years, but more than likely it'll probably take 5 to 10. 2 years ago. Why am I talking about this? Because I see a lot of people that I know that are in my circle that I've worked with, even down the street and I've done it too. I did it the other day. My expectation was to go to this store, right, to get these dry aged ribeye steaks. That's what I wanted to eat for dinner. I'd already mentally constructed the scenario of my expectation of what I was going to eat for dinner. So when I got there and they said, oh, our butcher went home at 4:30 today, so we can't cut any steaks, even though I can see it in the fridge and you could just get a knife and cut it. Apparently they couldn't do that. And they were kind of rude about it. But anyway, I just remember I got this feeling of disappointment. I got this kind of feeling of frustration because I had created a construct and constructed this reality that hadn't come to pass yet, haven't happened yet. And it made me angry. It was weird. It made me, nothing can make you feel anything. I made myself angry and disappointed due to the gap that I created between my expectations and the reality that occurred at the meat shop when they didn't have the steaks that I wanted to eat for dinner. Now, that is a small thing that a lot of us deal with. We expect things all the time in our lives. We expect to make a certain amount of money this month. We expect to be married at this point. We expect to do this. We expect to do that. And I really deeply, truly think that all these expectations that we have probably cause a lot of suffering in people's lives. A lot of suffering. I've known so many people, especially in my early 20s, that were like, if I'm not married and with kids by 30, I'm a fucking loser. If I'm not a millionaire by this point, I'm a loser. I did that. I used to say I built a network marketing business for about 4 years in my mid 20s, from probably the age of about 23 to about 27. I am so grateful for that period. I sat down one-on-one, face-to-face with probably about 500 to 600 people and did meetings with them. I also did public speaking in front of dozens and dozens of people over that 4-year period. And it helped develop my self-image and helped me believe that, well, number one, I can talk to people. Number two is that I can do public speaking. And it's probably helped me with this podcast. The reason I talk to you about that, though, is during that 3 to 4 year period, I believed, based on everybody that I was around and the business model they were part of and what we were doing, I believed that I should be retired from a job, not working a job and focusing only on my network marketing business. I believed that I should have done that by 28. I turned 30 on Friday. I'm not financially independent. I didn't retire at 28, but I thought I was going to. That 3 to 4 year period, to be honest, had such crazy expectations of myself that I basically caused myself to be absolutely fucking miserable most of the time, because nothing I did was ever good enough. It was miserable. It's like, oh, cool. Well, you did this meeting. It's like, yeah, but it's not enough. You got to do that 10 times more this month. And then you got to do that on average for another 3-4 years. And then based on what other people have done, you should have this result by that point. And that didn't happen. And that's fine, because I didn't put the effort that was required into it. I did put a lot of effort into it, but I didn't go to that next level. I didn't, and I know I didn't. But everything happens for a reason, and I'm thinking about it, and there was so much expectation of myself. And the reality was I wasn't probably doing most of the things, and I was just kind of kidding myself. So that expectation versus reality idea is I think what I want to communicate in this podcast is that you can apply that perspective and ask yourself the question, am I expecting something here that if the reality was different, it would cause me suffering in my life? Lately, I've been having no expectations of anything. For example, I've gone on 2 fishing trips recently. I don't expect anything. Like, I'm mentally not expecting to catch any fish. I'm not saying I wouldn't care if we didn't catch any fish. I literally just show up, and I'm trying to live my life in the present moment and not have any expectations about the future, because I have no idea what the future will bring. Not a fucking clue. Zero clue. So if I can just live my days every single day with no expectation of the future, I can be very happy in the now. But in the meantime, doing things so that my future self will be better off than the current version of myself is now. For example, eating good foods, saving money, investing money, exercising consistently, going to jiu-jitsu at least 3 to 5 times a week. Those are things that I have in place that make me happy, so that the future version of me will more than likely be in a better spot. But I don't have any crazy expectations of I need to have a certain amount of dollars in my bank account by this time. I know that my goals and my dreams will become a reality. I just don't know when. And because I don't know when, that can remove a lot of that suffering, a lot of that anxiety, a lot of that heavy stuff we place on ourselves sometimes, because we think if I'm not at this point by this time, then I'm a loser. It's when then syndrome. When I get here, then I'll allow myself some peace and some happiness And I'm just telling you, that is a lose-lose game. You will never win that game. When then syndrome is a real thing. When I have kids, then I'll do this. When I graduate university, then I'll do this. When I meet this woman or this man, or when I have kids, or when I get this dream job, or when I lose this amount of weight, when, then. Don't allow yourself to be stuck with when then syndrome and prevent your own happiness because of this massive expectation. And then reality comes around and it might not be the same. That is a massive cause for suffering. And you can avoid all that by not expecting anything, but by still working your fucking ass off and still working really, really hard, whatever in whatever it may be, to achieve whatever goal it is. Because when I was thinking, oh, what if you have no expectations? I'm like, well, wouldn't most people, well, I don't have any expectations, so I may as well just not try. No, why? Oh, I don't have expectations or anything. Oh, so you're going to sit there and do nothing and be lazy? So that was the thought. I was like, well, no, most people wouldn't do that. It's really having no expectations so that when any slight thing, whether it's good or bad, happens in the journey of whatever it is you're trying to create, then it doesn't really phase you. Like, oh, cool. Okay, this thing has come up. I'm going to deal with it now. And I wasn't expecting this bad thing to happen. It was a possibility, but now it's happened and I'm going to deal with it. But if you're expecting bad things to happen and you know all the bad things that could happen on that journey, you'll just have all this anxiety and all these things that come into your head all the time, which cause suffering, cause sleepless nights. And the same thing could go the other way. You get way too excited about a certain project or a certain thing you're doing. And then when the reality comes around and it's like, oh, well, shit, I should have taken into account that if you're building a business, for example, that this particular product or this distributor was going to have issues or whatever it may be. But I really wanted to really bring some light to that expectation versus reality. And the gap between expectation and reality is disappointment. And you can close that in your life with certain things by not expecting anything, but still work like a person that is going to get whatever it is that you originally wanted in the first place. It's not a matter of if it will happen, it's a matter of when it will happen. But if you set stipulations of an exact timeline, if it doesn't happen in this exact timeline, that will cause you suffering. So it's kind of it's almost a little mind game you have to play with yourself. But lately, it's been working for me. I've been having no expectations about anything, living my life, and things just keep kind of flowing. It's very interesting. It's like I had my biggest month at work last month. I know I did a podcast about momentum. The momentum has continued. I've had the biggest month at work. I always have the most peace, even though I used to have this belief that I couldn't make a bunch of money unless I was anxious and wound up all the time. And I've just had no expectation of anything. And it's just the money has been flowing my way, large amounts of it. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, amazing. And then I've having these just crazy things that are coming into my life, coming to my awareness, things I'm learning, just because I stopped having these crazy expectations about where I should be and really started looking at exactly where I am right now, started loving exactly where I am right now, which then opens you up for that abundance mindset for things to flow into your life. So, hope this helps. Expectation versus reality. Close that gap, which is disappointment, and you can have a much happier, more present, peaceful life in no matter what you're doing. So talk to you guys soon. Hope this helped. Bye.